The cocoa and chocolate crisis. What's really happening? In recent months, cocoa has suddenly become much more expensive, not just by a few percentage points, but by multiples. Such a rapid increase that has surprised producers, food industries, and financial markets. And the question is inevitable: why is this happening? And above all, is it a temporary or structural problem? Let's start with the numbers. In 2024 and early 2025, the price of cocoa surpassed historic highs, reaching levels never seen before on international markets. At times, it exceeded $10,000 per ton, more than double the historical average of previous years. For an industry that bases margins and planning on relatively stable costs, this is a huge shock. But this increase didn't come out of nowhere. The first big problem is supply. About 70% of the world's cocoa comes from West Africa, especially Ivory Coast and Ghana. Here, several recent studies and articles highlight a very worrying phenomenon. By 2050, up to 50% of the land currently suitable for cocoa cultivation could no longer be viable for this crop. The causes are climate-related: rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, and more frequent plant diseases. This means one simple thing: less cocoa available over time. And the problem is not just quantitative, but also qualitative. Yields are increasingly unstable, seasons less and less predictable, and for farmers it becomes difficult to guarantee continuous and reliable production. Added to this is a second key factor: demand keeps growing. Chocolate consumption is rising, especially in emerging markets, while in developed countries, cocoa is increasingly used in processed products, snacks, beverages, and industrial ingredients. According to several industry analyses, in the coming years, a structural gap will form between demand and supply. Even under normal conditions, the cocoa produced won't be enough to satisfy the global market. This scenario has direct consequences for chocolate producers. First of all, supply instability. Not knowing if and how much cocoa will be available makes production planning difficult. Then there are rising and highly volatile prices, which squeeze margins. Many companies are forced to revise price lists, reduce product sizes, or reformulate products. In other words, margin loss becomes a structural variable, no longer just an occasional issue. And it doesn't end there. Cocoa is also one of the foods with the highest environmental impact along the entire supply chain. Some analyses even rank it among the most polluting food products overall, second only to a few other raw materials. Deforestation, land use, emissions linked to transport and intensive processing make chocolate an environmentally costly product. Then there's the social impact. In many production areas, cocoa is tied to very low agricultural incomes, difficult working conditions, and in some cases, exploitation. This makes it increasingly complex for companies to justify a traditional supply chain, both ethically and reputationally. Faced with this scenario, producers are reacting in different ways. Price increases for consumers are just the most immediate response, but in the medium to long term, this is not enough. That's why alternative solutions are emerging that try to address the problem at its root. There are three main paths today. The first is cocoa upcycling, meaning the reuse of cocoa waste and byproducts to obtain new ingredients. It's an interesting solution environmentally, but often hard to make economically viable on a large scale. The second is cellular cultivation of cocoa. In theory, it allows producing a product with a taste identical to traditional cocoa without extensive farming. However, this technology still faces several hurdles: regulation, consumer acceptance, high costs, and long times before real industrial availability. The third path is alternative chocolate, meaning products not directly derived from cocoa. One example is using carob as a base. These solutions aim to replicate a taste very similar to chocolate, but with significant advantages: lower and more stable costs, less environmental and social impact, shorter and more local supply chains, and greater resilience to climate and geopolitical fluctuations. It's not about completely replacing traditional chocolate overnight, but it's increasingly clear that without innovation, the current model is not sustainable in the long run. The cocoa crisis is not just a price problem. It's a sign of a system reaching its limits, and that will have to evolve, one way or another. If you want to keep discovering curiosities, dynamics, and changes that are transforming what we eat every day, follow me and stay here. The interesting things are often exactly